The White Sox have lost 100 games, and it's not even September yet. Let's discuss this recent mark and record futility for the franchise next on Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert of Southside Showdown, part of the Fansided Network. You can check out my written content at southsideshowdown.com, and also I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, whether it's Spotify or Apple. Especially if you can't watch me on YouTube, you can always listen to me if you're, doing some yard work, stuff like that. Well, the White Sox set another franchise mark in futility with consecutive 100 defeat seasons for the first time in club history. I'll discuss in the first segment, reaching 100 losses is the mark of a pathetic franchise. Then in the second segment, I'll discuss how a player thinks talking about 100 losses is just beating a dead horse. Is he right? And finally, I'm going to discuss the Sox farm system on Wednesday with future Sox's Elijah Evans. So no minor league Monday report today. And that means no way back Wednesday this Wednesday. So let's do memories on Monday. And let's talk about those three big wins the Sox needed at the end of the 2008 season to win the AL Central. SupplyHouse.com is the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop for your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at SupplyHouse.com. Well, terrible, horrendous, embarrassing. Those are good descriptors of how the season is going. Never seen anything awful like this before is another way to describe how the season is going. Now, I'm in the minority here as I see nothing redeeming in the Sox losing more than 120 games. Why? Owner Jerry Reinsdorf has a very high capacity for embarrassment. Why do you think he kept Pedro Grifol around for as long as he did? And if his stadium deal is still in place where he had that sweetheart deal that he doesn't have to pay rent based on how low the attendance will be, then that gives him more of an incentive to not care about how this team being historically awful. He might not have to pay rent if that deal is still in place. Also, there's no top one or top two pick at the end of the rainbow. There's no Ethan Holiday, the consensus top prospect for next year, as the reward for dealing with this awful season. And it's not to say that you can get a great player at number 10, as the new lottery rules have the Sox picking there next year. But Holiday is considered to be better than his brother, Jackson Holiday, the top prospect in baseball. And even the 03 Tigers, who lost 119 games, got Justin Verlander in the 2004 draft. So losing 100 games in back-to-back seasons for the first time in franchise history and being the fastest in the 162 game era to get there, that's just plain pathetic. And that's what the season has been. One pathetic moment after another. The Sox have lost 3 of the first 4 games of this series with the Detroit Tigers. They still have one more game left in this dreadful series. But that has put the Sox at exactly 100 losses. Game 131 is when the 2024 White Sox reached 100 losses. And that is the first time in franchise history the Sox have had consecutive 100 defeats. The White Sox have been around since 1900 for context. And they've never lost back-to-back 100 seasons. And while the franchise has never won championships like the New York Yankees or the St. Louis Cardinals have, they've also never had long periods of losing at this magnitude. Yes, they've had their 90-loss seasons. We went through that rebuild era, but there was only one 100-loss season. The Sox are on pace to not only break the 1962 New York Mets 120 losses for most defeats in the 162-game era, or the 2003 Detroit Tigers for the worst record ever for a full 162-game completed schedule. They can easily lose 125 games. Again, pathetic. And as I've said on past episodes, the schedule does not get any easier. And as Chicago Tribune, Chicago White Sox beat reporter Lamont Pope, he tweeted out, to avoid breaking the 62 Mets record for futility, he tweeted this at Lamont Pope. It's the 6th 100-loss season in franchise history for the White Sox. The Sox need to go 12-19 in their final 31 games to avoid the 1962 Mets modern-day record, 40-120, for the most losses in a season. And he quote tweeted that as he put final Tigers 9, White Sox 4, loss number 100 for the Sox. The Sox become the second team in modern era MLB history to lose 100 plus times over the first 131 games of a season. 1916 Philadelphia A's, they were 29-101-1. You know, I find it hard that the Sox are going to go 12-19 over the last 31 games. I mean, this team is 7-37 since July 1st. And for pretty much a whole entire month since the beginning of July, they had Eric Fetty, Paul DeYoung, Michael Kopech, and they still went 3-22 in July. And now they're gone. And Garrett Crochet is just throwing 4 innings a start. So winning 12 games doesn't seem very likely to me. Not when you got Kai Bush out there, who I'm very excited for his potential, but he's allowing base runners left and right. You still got Chris Flexen starting games. He was okay on Saturday, but the Sox still ended up taking the loss because the bullpen was horrendously awful. And since they've won just 4 games this month and 3 games last month, there's a realistic shot the Sox could do the same in September. And if they don't win 5 games over the last 31 games, they could match the 1960 A's for 36 wins. Even more pathetic is the Sox have found ways to help their cause to get there. They've blown 47 leads. So that's not only being bad, that's also finding ways to lose. You know, think about this. For context, the Tigers, they were just playing bad as they blew 48 leads during the 03 season. Now, the 62 Mets, I think they blew like over 60 games. So they found ways to lose too. And the irony here is the Detroit Tigers is the club to hand the Sox this futile mark, since the White Sox are on their way toward having that 03 team buried in history. I mean, think about it. You thought 62 Mets, 03 Tigers. And now it's going to be 2024 White Sox, 2024 White Sox, 2024 White Sox. I mean, again, we're talking about the 1916 Philadelphia A's that the Sox are now being talked with. A team that only won, at that time, 29 games. And I think they ended up, if my math was correct, they ended up winning 36 games total that season. And the Sox have not even been competitive the last 2 games. Yesterday, lost 9-4. That was a prime example of how the White Sox have lost all season. You know, they built up an early 3-1 lead, and it seemed like the Sox would stave off making history on Sunday. Instead, Jonathan Cannon runs out of steam. The defense commits 4 errors, and the offense stopped scoring runs, and the bullpen allowed this to turn into a blowout. Well, hey, asking and talking about the historic downfall, I guess, is like being a dead horse, according to Andrew Benintendi. Let's discuss if he's right next on Locked On White Sox. Order supplies from the website that's made for the skilled trades. Find thousands of parts from hundreds of brands in just a couple of clicks at SupplyHouse.com. SupplyHouse.com gives you 24 access to huge selection of plumbing, h-vac, and electrical supplies with fast delivery anywhere in the U.S. Need help with an order? Get industry-leading after-sales service from their friendly and knowledgeable customer support team. Talk to a real person every time. And there's great news for plumbers, technicians, and contractors. Being a pro has its perks. Trade industry professionals can join their free TradeMaster program for free shipping and serious discounts on every order. Over 100,000 pros already trust TradeMasters, the TradeMaster program to deliver results. Apply for your membership today and get a competitive edge on every order at SupplyHouse.com/TM. Save money and time when you order online. Order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from SupplyHouse.com. Real people, real service. And thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Paul Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs. Here in the dog days of summer, prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And the White Sox try to avoid getting swept as they complete a 4-game series with their division rival, the Detroit Tigers, tonight. The first pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Make sure to hit that like button on today's episode and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. Also, follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts, especially if you are in your car, not able to watch me on YouTube. Take me within your car, or, got to do some housework. You can hear me on your Apple Podcasts or Spotify. All right, Andrew Benintendi. He got off to a horrific start, and that's one of the reasons in the many of a laundry list of reasons the Sox are at 100 losses on August 26th. Maybe he's not one to say talking about losing 100 games is like beating a dead horse. And it is not as if this is something no Whites, because if he says this is talking like being a dead horse, and I'll give the quote in a second, he's got to understand this is something no White Sox fan has ever seen, ever. The Sox have never lost 100 games in back-to-back seasons, ever. 5 times, 5, before 2024 have the Sox ever had 3-digit losses. And now it is 6, with 2 of those instances coming within the past 2 years. 2 teams that Andrew Benintendi has been on. This may be a franchise that only has 11 playoff appearances and 3 World Series wins in 124 years of existence. This is also a club that has never lost more than 106 games in a season, and that is about to be dwarfed by the final total this year. Because the Sox aren't going 31-0. And it is not a dead horse for those like you and I that are still choosing to, love this team, choosing to watch this team, or at least check in for some of you, because remember, that's what I'm here for. I'll watch the games if you want to check out and, come back in. And it won't be a dead horse once the national media comes back in a few weeks to discuss the Sox breaking the 1962 Mets record for futility. And heck, it was already a headline on ESPN.com saying the Sox second fastest team to 100 losses ever. And technically they are the fastest team to 100 losses. Yeah, second fastest team to 100 losses ever. They are the fastest team to 100 losses in the 162 game era. Both the 62 Mets and the 03 Tigers, they got there in game 134. And it's definitely not a dead horse when the 1916 Philadelphia A's, the A's that have moved now twice, they went from Philadelphia to Kansas City to Oakland, and now they're going to be moving to Las Vegas. And the 1899 Cleveland Spiders are being mentioned as teams that can be considered worse than the Chicago White Sox. You're really only looking at maybe 2 teams when teams cite, where the Sox are in terms of how bad they are. 2. And again, the A's, they're on their way to Vegas. They haven't played in Philadelphia in, almost 100 years. All right, I want to share what Benintendi said in the context of the Athletics' John Greenberg's recent piece on the 100 losses. And I love how the Sox are losing is the reason that the Athletic has started to cover the White Sox again. Remember the Sox, they laid off James Fegan, who's now at Sox Machine doing great work. But think about that. The Sox are so lowly that a national publication owned by the New York Times doesn't have a regular beat reporter. But now that they're losing, we're gonna talk about them. This is what Greenberg had to write. Excellent piece in The Athletic if you don't have a subscription. Chicago baseball history is rich with losing teams, but no one has done it better than the 2024 White Sox. Quote, "We've been talking about it all year," Sox left fielder Andrew Benintendi said. "I think it's beating a dead horse at this point," end quote. That brings up the question, could the 2024 Sox beat a team made up of 9 dead horses? Someone smart set up that simulation for me. Quote, "I think everyone in the locker room is aware of the record and how frustrating it is," interim White Sox manager Grady Sizemore said, end quote. Asking the White Sox about how bad they are doesn't get much into the way of filthy quotes. There are no Paul Konerkos or AJ Pierzynskis in that clubhouse, just a bunch of young guys, mercenaries, and 4A players. It's not their fault. Well, the actual losses are, but the blame for the sad state of the franchise goes all the way to the top. As chairman Jerry Reinsdorf avoids the media, the players are left to give themselves credit for not getting crushed for the entire game every game. Quote, "We've been staying in at least competitive late in the games, even when we're down," Benintendi said. Earlier in the year, when we were down 4 or 5 runs in the 7th, it seemed like it was pretty much over. At least we're trying to put ourselves in the position to potentially win it or tie it. It's happened more in the last 2 weeks than the rest of the season, end quote. Since manager Pedro Grifol was mercifully fired August 8th, the Sox are 3-11 and have been outscored 76-48. That's what amounts to progress for a major league team. 3 wins in a fortnight is a real heater for this club. All right, that, again, if you don't have a subscription to The Athletic because maybe you're not happy that they don't cover the Sox, John Greenberg is still a great writer. He founded The Athletic. He is in Chicago, and they're losing, so at least you're going to get some coverage. But Benintendi, the man who has the richest free agent contract ever in team history, thinks the team is thinking, hey, we're fighting because of what? One game on Wednesday when the Sox were tied 2-2 against the Giants and scored 4 runs to win. He thinks that, well, we're fighting back now. This team doesn't battle back. 10 comeback wins is a big reason this club has lost 100 games. 10. I talked about it last week. The Angels and the Nationals have more comeback victories than the Sox have wins. And don't say trying to put yourself into the position of potentially winning it or tying it, because this club keeps putting itself in position to lose games. 47 blown leads. 47. You're not putting yourself in a position to win. You're putting yourself in a position by losing with that stat. A standard, maybe all I had to say was, hey, all we can do is keep working. Like Pedro Grifol used to say. That would have been better than what Benintendi had to say. It's not beating a dead horse. It is what it is. Remember, at one point, Benintendi was literally the worst qualified hitter in baseball before he went on the IL with an Achilles injury. And getting next to nothing out of him, and Andrew Vaughn being basically a replacement level player and him having that slump to start the season is what has made this lineup super weak. Both Andrews are clearly hitting better than they were on their early season misery, but the Sox are still losing. And Benintendi represents one of the laundry list of reasons for the current state of this franchise. He was given the largest free agent contract ever, well under $100 million. The going rate for good to elite talent. And he continues to regress from being a solid player, because that's what he was. He was a solid baseball player. Although he was given a lot of money for being a non-power hitting left fielder. That's the other thing. They gave him $75 million to basically hit singles. You don't want your left fielder to hit singles. I'm sorry. And this team is relying on replacement level players like Andrew Vaughn or overvaluing players like Benintendi to be part of the core of this lineup. And that's why this dead horse is getting beaten, because this lineup's core is made up of basically replacement level players and players they've overvalued, or guys with star talent that are slumping badly like Luis Robert Jr. And then Miguel Vargas, who's supposed to be the crown jewel at the trade deadline, he's hitting 173. Offensively, there's just no hope. They rarely hit home runs. Vaughn finally hit a home run to snap what feels like a 2-week drought. I think it was like less than a week, but still, this team can't give you instant offense. And that's why is not being a dead horse, especially when the team would just have to go 29-2 just to win 60 games. 29-2 just to reach the old baseball logic of you're guaranteed to win 60, you're guaranteed to lose 60. It's what you do with the other 42 that matters. And that is what's so confounding, is the Sox during the dog days of summer rarely can even run into a win. Heck, instead of citing a dead horse, just cite being unlucky. Unlucky is another reason to be in this, that they're in this mess. Opponents do seem to find holes in the defense. Although sometimes the defense is poorly positioned. But broken bat hits, they turn into game winning or tying singles. How many times have we seen a broken bat just fall? No matter how well or badly positioned. They rarely run into a starting pitcher on a bad day. Although the Sox being bad probably helps that pitcher probably feel like he can be an ace that day. But this team is bad, unlucky, and poorly led, and that gets you a carcass of 100 defeats on August 26th. And yes, it's going to get beaten. It's going to get beaten even worse in about 20 days when the Sox are getting close to beating the 1962 Mets record for futility. Let's talk about some better days since I got Elijah Evans on Wednesday to talk all things White Sox farm system. So I'm swiping minor league Monday and way back Wednesday to today to create Memory Monday. I want to talk about the final 3 days in September 2008 when the Sox beat 3 different division rivals to get to the playoffs. Next on Locked On White Sox. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, FanDuel has something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Say you are done with playing the White Sox and you want to move on to the Chicago Bears. FanDuel has some futures on the Bears that if they hit, you can make some nice cash. The Bears are at plus 3,500 for the Super Bowl. $5 on that can win you $175. The Bears to score 1+ scoring touchdown might be tough to actually happen. And I think that's 1+ passing touchdown. Might be tough to actually happen, but it is plus 2,100 and it can be fun to root for. To hit, as that's what my buddy does when he plays FanDuel. He likes to make his realistic bets and then puts a few bucks down on some fun ones, like say, hey, this team will go into overtime. This game will go into overtime. And if it hits, a little extra cash. If it doesn't, well, maybe you're out a few bucks. But maybe then you hit on your realistic bets. Just visit fanduel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sports book. And the White Sox try to avoid getting swept as they complete a 4-game series with their division rival, the Detroit Tigers, tonight. The first pitch is at 7:10 p.m. Central Standard Time. Catch every pitch of the White Sox hometown broadcast with SiriusXM on the SXM app. Search White Sox. And welcome back into Locked On White Sox. I am your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all my everydayers who've been sticking with me this far. Hope you had a good weekend. Mine was all right. My daughter had a little play date. We had a couple of friends over on Saturday night. It was a pretty nice little weekend there. Much better than watching the White Sox lose 13-4 and 9-4 like they did. Man, it was tough to watch the White Sox get just absolutely trounced by the Tigers this week. They just cannot beat their division rivals this year. But in 2008, that club went on a magical three-day run to win the AL Central. And looking back at those final 3 days, you realize this franchise was once capable of doing great things. However, it was also capable of falling way short of maximizing the moment, like the club has done in every season outside of 2005. The Sox went to Minnesota to start the final week of 2008. They had a 1.5-game lead in the division, and they got swept as the Sox could never win at the Humpty Dump. And it looked like, once again, the Twins would get the better of the Sox and take the division. Just looked like, again, it was going to be 2002, 2003, 2004. The Twins just always winning the division because the Sox just cannot win in Minnesota. Somehow the Kansas City Royals refused to lose the first 2 games of the season finale series with the Twins, and that left the door open for the Sox. However, the Sox, they lost the first two games of a 3-game set with Cleveland. So it was looking pretty bleak. The Sox had to beat Cleveland to force a makeup game with the Detroit Tigers. And then they needed to beat the Tigers to force a game 163 with Minnesota. And Mark Burley, he came through that Sunday with 7 innings of 1-run ball despite allowing 9 hits to Cleveland. Paul Konerko hit a home run. Jermaine Dye went 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. And the Sox won 5-1 to force the Tigers to come to Chicago to play a game that they did not want to play. I mean, the Tigers started Freddie Garcia. They did not want to be there. But it looked like the Tigers were poised to play spoiler. They took a 2-1 lead heading into the bottom of the 6th. And that is when Alexei Ramirez hit his memorable grand slam to put the Sox head for good, as Gavin Sheets in the bullpen kept the Tigers to just 2 runs in that 8-2 win. And that was an amazing moment when Alexei hit that grand slam. He puts the arms up. That 5-run six, it was like, all right, here's game 163 against the Minnesota Twins to determine the winner of the AL Central. And thankfully, it was played on the South Side. The blackout game, where John Danks pitched 8 innings of shutout ball. Ken Griffey Jr. gave Sox fans at least one memorable moment in his Hall of Fame career during his very brief time on the South Side when he threw out Michael Kadire at home in the 5th inning to keep it 0-0. And that was a seed. That was vintage Griffey. And people forget, he did play 2 months for the White Sox. Just like Manny Ramirez. Remember when Kenny was obsessed with getting, Hall of Fame players? Well, I know Manny's not a Hall of Fame player because of, those things. But, great legendary players of the late 90s and the 2000s. Remember, he was totally obsessed with that. And he seemed to keep adding them during the old August waiver, trade deadline period. And then Jim Thome opened the bottom of the 7th with a blast to deep center. And I'm still convinced that ball is orbiting Saturn. I mean, he absolutely crushed that ball to deep center. I mean, way, way out. And then Bobby Jenks closed out the 9th. The Sox won the AL Central 1-0. And I remember I had to watch it on tape delay because I had a sexual harassment training at the radio station I worked at. And I remember thinking, well, at least I don't have to watch the White Sox blow a game to the Twins, because it just always seemed like the Sox could never get over that Twins hump. But they did in 2008. Magical, except the Sox ran into the red-hot Tampa Bay Rays in the playoffs, and they lost 3-1 in the ALDS. Such an amazing run to get to the postseason, only to end so abruptly. And I just remember that. Like, Javier Vasquez, oh gosh. It would have been nice to, that's when bullpenning should have been, rolled out then. That guy was terrible. I mean, he even admitted, I'm not clutch. I'm just here to throw the ball. I don't care if I get hit. The blackout game, obviously, in game 3 was amazing. But the Rays, they were stacked that year. And even though they didn't have fans, they were the darlings. Joe Madden was pushing all the right buttons. And they went all the way to the World Series, only to obviously lose to Philadelphia. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the fall classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. You can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'll be back tomorrow, tentatively scheduled. I have on tap Sportsnet's Beznek Zakuri on the show to discuss the last couple of weeks in the White Sox world. Supposed to have him on last week. As you know, I got COVID. My daughter got COVID. We're both testing negative. My wife, though, she got COVID. She was still feeling really sick last week. She's on the mend, so hopefully I'll be able to get Beznek on the show tomorrow. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding how losing 100 games before September even starts is pathetic, how it is not being a dead horse to discuss this historically awful mark, and that magical end to the 2008 season. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub or at Locked On Sox, or email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day. I will talk to you tomorrow.